We'll now move to leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. We welcome Deputy Mary Lou McDonald, please.
Count Corla. Taoiseach, parents of children with special needs face a constant battle with the state to get their children the education services to which they are entitled. And as we speak, many parents once again begin their annual fight to secure an appropriate school place for their child next September. This pressure is exacerbated every year as they also struggle to secure a summer provision place for their child. A survey published today by Family Carers Ireland reveals that 72% of carers have never received respite. Many of these same families will also go without the support of July provision. The stress, the exhaustion, the sense of abandonment for these families is very real. Some children, like Jack McNiff from Kildare, have gone years without summer provision. Jack has Down syndrome, a rare auto-inflammatory disease and severe intellectual disability. He's non-verbal, a wheelchair user and requires 24-hour nursing care. He needs to have a nurse on standby. Jack was in hospital last summer and was cocooning during COVID due to his vulnerability. So the last time Jack had July provision was 2019. And he's going to miss out again this summer due to a lack of resources. Taoiseach, Jack isn't alone. We have parents contacting us every day, stressed at their wits' end because they can't secure a summer place. And they fear that their child's progress will be hampered, that they could become withdrawn, lonely, distressed due to lack of routine. They describe for us the huge strain placed on the child, themselves, on the entire family. Taoiseach, summer provision is critical to provide children with complex educational needs with the support that they need to progress. It provides the socialisation, the routine, the stimulation, so important to ensure that these children can move forward. Many children, like Jack, require round-the-clock care, and parents are exhausted. So the respite that the summer provision should provide is very, very important, and it's devastating when parents can't access a programme. The government's approach is at the heart of the problem here, Taoiseach. Schools struggle to deliver summer programmes for many reasons, because special needs assistants aren't paid fairly, because government issue guidelines very late every year, making it difficult for schools to plan. But it is your decision to cut the capitation payment for the summer provision from €45 to just €30 per week, which completely undermines the quality and the type of activities that can be offered to children, placing incredible pressure on the capacity of schools to deliver what these children need, contributing to an alarming shortage of school-based programmes for so many children. Is 5 bhliain túil í áiteanna sa láthair saoirí a all. Cruhéann sé strus mór de hismóirí a bhfuil riachtanas speisialta oideachas áileoraigh ag a cuid póistí. So caithfí an rialtas réití a thabhairt chun cinn. Taoiseach, children with special educational needs and their parents need real solutions and urgent action to expand delivery of school-based summer provision programmes. The first step, Taoiseach, must be to reverse your cut to the summer provision capitation payment. And I am asking you today to do that as a matter of urgency.
Much Ken Corla, and thanks to Deputy McDonald for raising this important issue. And it is an important issue because parents of children with special educational needs do rely on the summer provision. It provides excellent support to children during the summer period. It also provides excellent support to families as well. And I want to assure parents watching in today that I intend to prioritise special educational needs every single day that I am Taoiseach. That's why upon becoming Taoiseach, I established a new Cabinet Committee on Disability, which I personally chair. It's why I also elevated the Cabinet Voice for Special Educational Needs, appointing Minister Naughton, a Minister of State, to sit at the Cabinet table. It's why we've provided €12 million more in recent weeks to assessment of need funding with Minister Rabbitte as well. And let me be very clear, because what you shouldn't do is come into this House and create anxiety for parents. There has been no cut to the summer school programme. The budget this year is the same as the budget last year. What there has been, Deputy McDonald, though, is the deployment of that budget based on feedback that we have heard from those who use the programmes. And what we have heard from them, you're correct on this point. Access to the programme was the biggest challenge. So I'm sure you'll welcome the fact that this year we have seen more schools apply than we saw last year. 1,700 schools up from 1,400. So again, parents who have enough going on without being made into political footballs, watching into this programme need to know that already this year we've seen 300 more schools put up their hand and say, I want to provide the summer schools programme than last year. So let's not add to the anxiety that these parents already face. What we are doing is actually making sure, and we did this last year and we'll do it again this year, that we continue to pay a higher personal rate of pay to SNAs and to teachers working on the school-based scheme. The capitation rate for the special needs schools, where children with the most complex needs attend, is actually €60, not 30. And what we are doing in relation to the €30 capitation rate is that's being supplemented by a range of new measures, which you may or may not be aware of, but measures that weren't in place last year. So, for example, we now have a dedicated national coordinator for the programme. We've provided additional grant funding to special school. We've a reduction of the length of the school day as well. We've provided from September for every special needs school in Ireland to have an administrative deputy principal, 100 new post-primary teaching posts across our special schools from September, a new nursing pilot programme to support children in special schools as well, and also new programmes have been introduced to support the transition of children with special educational needs after school. So be assured, the budget for the summer school programme overall remains the same. The number of schools looking to take part is growing, up 300 on last year. And I can tell you, I know a lot about the summer schools programme. I know how important it is to families. My own family benefited from this programme as well. It is incredible. It's one that we will continue to provide every single support that we possibly can. So I don't need you to Mary Lou-splain to me in relation to this issue as well. This government supports this programme, will continue to support this programme, and we shouldn't be making political footballs out of this issue.
McDonald, thank you.
Thank you, Count Corla. Well, I've described Jack's position and situation to you. His mother wrote to the Irish Times in May outlining the position. His position has not changed since then. He cannot access summer provision. So far from making a political football of anything, this mother, this family are appealing for change, for urgent action, so that Jack can access the support and service that he needs in the course of this summer. The capitation grant has been cut from €45 to €30. Schools, SNAs, everybody who wishes to provide this wonderful service to Jack and all of the other Jacks are reporting to us directly the type of stress and strain that I have described for you. So I have made a proposal to you in terms of reversing of that cut, but can I invite you then more specifically in respect of Jack, that you respond, Taoiseach. His mum has made his case very, very publicly because she's desperate.
Thank you, Deputy.
So can I invite you to respond directly to her and by extension to Jack?
Thank you very much.
So what I'd invite you to do is not mislead people, because what you have suggested in this House today, conveniently, what you have suggested is that the capitation rate change has resulted in a reduction in service, when actually there's more schools providing it this year than last year. It's up from 1,700 to 1,400. That's more. That's additional schools. Like, we can all do the maths. That's more schools. So the reality of the situation is, for Jack and for every other child, this government is ensuring that there will be more schools taking place in the July provision, the summer provision this year than last year. And this government is investing in more supports specifically for the special schools, because the special schools are the schools where the children with the most complex needs rely on in terms of providing the service. So let's not come in here with your kind of one setting of performative outrage, and let's actually engage on the substance of the issue. More schools availing of the programme, a Minister for Special Education Needs for the first time ever sitting at the Cabinet table, a Cabinet committee to break down silos and end bureaucracy. That's what people want, not just of defining of the problems, but actually coming up with solutions. I would have thought you learnt that. I would have thought you learnt that this weekend.
Thank you. Please now, please. Deputy Holly Cairns, please. 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 Can we stop the heckling, please? Can we hear Deputy Holly Cairns now without interruption, please?
Taoiseach, counts in the elections are still taking place, so the elections aren't quite over. But one thing that was made clear to me on the doors is that people out there aren't interested in the Punch and Judy show that often takes place in this House. They're not interested in petty political one-upmanship or politics that values sound bites over substance. The people who voted for our candidates that they met on the doors, who put their trust in them and voted for them, want representatives who will work hard, who are clear on what they can deliver, and who can offer credible solutions to the many problems that we face. We all know what those problems are. The housing disaster, healthcare crisis, climate emergency, and threadbare disability services. Taoiseach, the findings of a new report from Family Carers Ireland today are shocking, but they shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. Nearly 2/3 of carers have never received any respite. A similar number say they struggle to make ends meet, and their loved ones don't receive any formal support. Nearly 50% have had to pay privately for products or services that should be publicly available to them. And nearly 1 in 4 have missed a mortgage payment or rent payment over the last year. Taoiseach, the report outlines a litany of failure when it comes to state services and state reports. The problem is not even that there's no support out there, although that is increasingly the case for many families. It's that the state often seems to erect barriers to deny people what little support does exist. Qualifying criteria for support that are almost impossible to meet, time-consuming and complicated applications that people don't have the time and the energy to fill out, and an attitude of ambivalence and apathy from state institutions that chips away at people's morale and their self-belief. Taoiseach, you've repeatedly promised to support carers, but people don't buy it because they've heard it all before. The same promises, the same commitments that bear no relationship to the reality experienced by carers out there. And that reality is what is contained in today's report. The daily financial struggle, the anger at the lack of services, the constant anxiety about the absence of supports, and the dread about what will happen to loved ones when the carer is no longer around. Taoiseach, there's no bigger gap between rhetoric and reality than the one that exists when it comes to disability and care. Disabled people and older people have a right to live independent lives that the state refuses to vindicate. While the government repeatedly tells carers how much they're valued and then refuses to actually value them. It's an indictment of this government that access to respite, which is already in crisis, is actually deteriorating.
Thank you, Deputy.
Taoiseach, carers and their families were promised a lot. When will you actually deliver? When will carers have access to at least 20 days respite a year, and will you abolish the means test for carers allowance?
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Well, thanks very much, Cian Corlin, and I congratulate Deputy Cairns on the councillors for her party that got elected, and wish everybody got elected well. But lots of people also voted for my party, and lots of people voted for my coalition party's colleagues in Fianna Fáil and the Greens as well. So your view of how people view the political situation isn't always in line with what the people actually decided to do at the ballot box on Friday, because more than around 53% of council seats have gone to councillors from Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and the Green Party as well. So just to be aware of that, your party did well in the elections. I congratulate you, but these parties in this benches did better too. So let's not, when you say people don't buy it, The people had a chance to give their views on lots of issues in a very large democratic exercise. And sometimes the views expressed in this House aren't actually the views that are expressed out in towns, villages and cities right across this country. I want to thank you for raising a very important issue around respite and around care. And I want to begin by saying I intend to meet directly with Family Carers Ireland this month with the relevant ministers, because I do think we need to listen and drill down into a number of the findings of their very useful report that they've published today. And let me begin by expressing my gratitude to the thousands of carers across our country who provide unending care and support for their loved ones. And let me tell you some of the things that we do intend to do to support them and some of the things that we have already done, because I do fully understand the importance of respite provision for the families of children and adults with disabilities, and indeed the positive impact that it can have on their lives. That's why we have doubled respite funding in Ireland since 2018. It has doubled, and it's why my colleague Minister Anne Rabbitte will in the next couple of weeks publish a new respite investment plan. This is a plan that will take the additional money that we allocated in the budget and will detail how the funding is going to be used to support respite for children and for adults around the country. Because we do need to do better and we need to do more when it comes to respite. And I'm really looking forward to that plan, because it's going to look at a whole variety of different ways we can help families. It's going to look at how we can provide day respite, how we can provide more in terms of overnight respite, how we can look at making sure that the respite capacity, the residential capacity that's in place is being fully utilised as well. We should say, for context, in 2018 there were 87,177 overnight respite nights provided. That number was 151,123 last year, in addition to 45,424 day respite places. I accept we are not doing enough and there is a need to do more. That is why we're going to publish a respite investment plan to detail how we intend to do more in the months ahead. But by any fair measure, the level of respite provision has very significantly increased. The budget more than doubled, the number of nights provided gone from over 87,000 to over 151,000. Of course, respite is just one of a number of things that are done to support carers. We also, from a financial point of view, try to support through the Carer Support Grant that Minister Humphreys ensured was provided to 132,000 carers last week as well. And this very week, Count Corla, we're also increasing the carers allowance disregard, meaning more carers will qualify for this support and more income can be disregarded. And that's a very positive way of helping carers.
Deputy Cairns.
Count Corla. Taoiseach, respectfully, I said that people didn't buy the rhetoric on carers, and I think that's a really good example of how different the rhetoric is versus the reality of what people experience. And the problem with what you're saying is that people have heard it all before. Carers have heard the same promises, not just from you, but from your predecessor and the Taoiseach before that, and the Taoiseach before that. But instead of things getting better, they're getting worse. Already, threadbare services have become even harder to access. That goes for respite, it goes for access to therapies through Children's Disability Network teams. Progressing disability services is a failure. Financial supports have become harder to qualify for. Respite should be regular and routine. It's basically non-existent for many people. Taoiseach, the contents of the report are shameful. The system that carers rely on is utterly broken and continuing to deteriorate. Trying to access any kind of support, no matter how meagre, involves a fight, and many carers don't have the energy to fight. They can't take on the state and care for their loved ones, and they shouldn't have to. Almost everyone in this House would be supportive of efforts to improve services and supports for carers. So why has there been so little progress? You say you're doing a report. We have all of the reports we need on this issue. What we need is action.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
No, I didn't say we're doing a report at all. I said what we're going to do we don't need any more reports. What we're going to do between now and budget day is review the means test. Because when I talk to carers and the respite investment plan, well, hang on, there's two different issues here. Let's take them both sequentially. In relation to the means test, when I go around the country, there are too many people who find the means test a bit mean. And we want to make the means test more generous and more understanding so more carers can benefit. That's why this week, you can shake your head all you want because you can answer questions and sometimes don't like when I answer them. That's why this week we're making changes to the income disregard so that more people will benefit from carers allowance. I'm sure you welcome that. That's happening this week. No one needs to wait for any report or plan for that. In relation to respite respite investment, what Minister Rabbitte is quite rightly doing is going to detail to this House, and much more importantly than this House, to people relying on respite services, how the €15 million extra we've allocated is going to make a real difference. How we're going to get from the 87,000 nights we were providing to above 151,000 and beyond that as well. And what I'm telling you is we're going to do more, because every year this government has been in office, we've done more on the carers allowance, more on the carers benefit, more on the means test, more on respite. And I agree, I'm willing to work in a non-combative way to see how we can do even more, and I look forward to meeting with Family Carers Ireland this month.
Thank you, Taoiseach. We go now to Deputy Paul Murphy, please.
Thanks, Count Corla. First of all, I want to thank all of the people for-profit activists who stood for election, who campaigned for our candidates, and all those people who voted for us. And we plan to use our increased council representation to fight for working class people across this country. Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are looking pretty pleased with themselves today. I think you said yourself that you did better in these elections. Pride comes before a fall, Taoiseach. One crucial fact that should be mentioned is that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael combined had the lowest percentage vote in the history of this state in local elections. The lowest. Your vote share dropped. You didn't have a better election, you had a worse elections. Your parties are deeply unpopular, still. And Taoiseach, a general election will focus the minds. If a clear left alternative is on offer, if there's a chance to end the rule of 100 years of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, responsibility for the housing crisis, the health crisis, the lack of action on cost of living, the disgraceful situation facing families with kids with additional needs, I think many people will take that chance. I think a much greater number of people will turn out to do that. We will see. In this election, though, we did see a very cynical attempt by the government to make immigration the central issue, to distract from your failures. Almost every week in the run-up to the election, you had new policies of performative cruelty. I have figures, new figures, to show that the government spent almost €100,000 in clearing tents and erecting fences at the canal, while there are thousands of empty beds in state-provided accommodation. Announcing cuts to payments for Ukrainian women and children, means testing of asylum seekers. It was a trap designed for Sinn Féin, and one that they unfortunately fell right into by welcoming each of these measures and saying they would go any further. The truth is that none of these policies will do anything to address the housing crisis, the health crisis, or the cost of living crisis. That €100,000 would have been much better spent on emergency accommodation for homeless people. But also the truth is that the vast majority of people did not fall for this weapon of mass distraction. The big issues on the doors were the housing crisis, healthcare, investment in facilities in our communities, and so on. And immigration is not the cause of any of those issues. Responsibility lies with the government and an economic system which prioritises profit over people's needs. That poses a challenge now for the left. We need to come together. One, to mobilise on the issue of housing. We need a mass demonstration supported by the trade union movement on housing before the budget, because with this government, housing is going to continue to get worse and worse and worse, because you represent those who profit from the housing crisis, not those who suffer from it. Final thing is there will be a general election. We need a vote left, transfer left. We need a commitment from parties of the left. No coalition with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, no scapegoating of asylum seekers, and a commitment to take on those who are benefiting from these crises. And I think then let's allow people to have a choice in the next election. I think if we inspire people with the chance that there's an alternative to Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, I think very many people will take that choice.
Thank you, Deputy.
I'm not really sure where to start there. So there will be a general election in due course. Deputy Murphy, I'm really looking forward to it actually, because there will definitely be alternative political views on offer. And I'm not sure who's in this left coalition, whether you have Sinn Féin in it or not, and maybe they're not sure themselves either, but they'll work it out after they have the review. But look, Every single week, this government will bring forward new policies, new ideas and new plans to make progress on some of the issues that are often intractable and difficult, because that's what being in government's about. It's about turning up to work every day, it's about working hard, it's about making decisions and delivering for the people. And that's what we intend to do. You are beyond wrong when you come to our approach on migration in terms of how you categorise it. Because one thing I must say I respect you on, and I mean this sincerely, is your consistent calling out of racism. And I support you when you do this, and we've had exchanges in this House, and all of us in this House must continue to call out racism and all examples of racism, and I accept your bona fides in relation to that. However, when it comes to migration, the absolute worst thing for a party of the centre, and I know you mightn't like parties of the centre, but the absolute worst thing for parties of the centre to do is get off the pitch, is to shirk responsibility and say that's too difficult an issue, that's too challenging, there's nothing we can do about it, isn't it just a global challenge? I'm sure will we just all commentate about it. That's a failure of leadership. And the only thing that happens when you allow that vacuum to be created is it gets filled by the far right. And I can tell you, I am absolutely determined as a politician proudly of the centre and as a Taoiseach of this country to not in any way, shape or form allow others seek to sow division. So what we're going to do in this country is have a functioning migration system that is fair, that has rules. The rules will be applied. They will be applied without fear or favour. We will provide accommodation, shelter for people, safety for people, access to sanitation. But we won't just have a conversation about accommodation, because that's not the totality of any country's migration policy. We will also talk about processing times. We'll also talk about how the welfare system interacts and how that happens relative to other European countries. We will, of course, work with the PSNI and others in relation to collaboration, because we live in a common travel area, and Minister McEntee is doing work in relation to that. We'll have deportations for those who don't have a right to be here, because that's how, again, any migration system must work. And we'll continue to invest in integration, because this country is the better as a result of immigration. Our health services, our businesses, our shops, our communities, our schools are all the better. So this is about having a balanced approach where the compassion of the Irish people is met with a common sense system that works. And let's be honest, if we can in relation to this debate, we're building a migration system in real time, because we've gone from around 3,500 people a year coming to this country to over 20,000 people. People are welcome in Ireland. We want to help people who have a right to be here. And in order to do that, we need to make sure we have a system that is efficient and effective. So, sadly for you, though, I know you'll continue to do it for your own reasons, this party isn't a nasty party. This government isn't a nasty government when it comes to migration. It is one that actually wants to push back against the rhetoric of the extremes, deliver for people and make sure we have a sustainable system.
Taoiseach Deputy Murphy.
Taoiseach says his party is not a nasty party. His party has chosen, with Fianna Fáil and the Greens shamefully, to give €100,000 to private companies to clear tents. The tents arrive back the next day, to put up fences to block access to our city, and to leave people sleeping in tents in our streets. Nobody should be sleeping in a tent in our street, and it is a cynical policy choice to do so. I make the point again, there are empty beds in the state accommodation system that you are choosing not to use. And why? In my opinion, it's extremely cynical politics. You know that if the central issue in the next general election is housing, if the central issue in the next general election is cost of living, if the central issue in the next general election is a healthcare crisis, they are not winning grounds for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And so you want to centre the issue of migration and present yourselves as being hard, even though it will not make a single difference. All this cruelty you're doing does not make ordinary people's lives any better whatsoever. But I think the job on our side of the House is to say that very, very clearly. Migrants are not responsible at all for the housing crisis that you have caused. They're not responsible for the cost of living crisis. They're not responsible for the health crisis. And I think most people, from having this conversation a lot, when you talk, I certainly will, when you talk to people, actually most people are open to hearing that and can be won to that argument and know that it's your responsibility. And I think they want there to be a real alternative on offer in a few months' time.
Taoiseach.
And people decide to present the election results in whatever way suits them. All I know is that more people went out and voted for my party than any other party. More people went out and gave Fianna Fáil seats in the local elections than any other party. Many people voted for the Green Party. The people on this side of the House received many mandates in urban Ireland, in rural Ireland, in big towns, big villages. So this idea of reject, mass mobilise, get the government, I'm sorry, but it just didn't go like that in the last years, and better luck next time. But we will continue to have a multi-agency approach to this issue. We will not tolerate a siloed approach where one organisation says, oh, that's a matter for another department, that's a matter, I can't tolerate that sort of nonsense. The reality of the situation is we were seeing illegal, dangerous, tented villages emerging in parts of this city. We were very near a public health emergency, and I will make no apology for making sure the laws of the land are upheld and for making sure people are in humanity. You cannot just erect a tent wherever you want and start blockading streets. You can't do it. I know that's your politics.
You might do it.
It's not what this government will stand over. We will provide people with shelter, with sanitation, and as a result of our work, Minister O'Gorman has provided hundreds of more people with access to safe accommodation. Of no solutions.
Thank you.
At all.
Deputy Thomas
You don't
Pringle
want
now
any
without
fairness.
interruption, please.
Taoiseach, it is bewildering the amount of hype and positivity there is in the government benches at the local election results, which have delivered you actually net seat losses overall. And look, you're entitled to celebrate, and that's fair play to you, and it's political squabbling will go on between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and yourselves and Sinn Féin and stuff like that there. But in Donegal, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have returned with only 2/3 of the seats they won in 2019, with many of your sitting councillors scraping in on the last counts. The 100% Redress Party topped the poll in the Cairns electoral area, which is Minister McDonald's backyard, and took 4 council seats in total. They are now a larger party than Fine Gael on the council, and there is a clear message for government here from the people of Donegal in relation to the defective block redress crisis. It is not working for the thousands of people that are living in crumbling homes across the constituency. They see no end to the saga, they see no future for their families and children, and they see no way out of the distress that is ruining their lives. They are strong and stoic people, but they are at the end of their tether. They have told government over and over again why the scheme won't work for them. Now they have used the electoral system to deliver their message. And they have elected Ali Farron in Carndonagh, Joy Beard in Burncana, Thomas Devine in Letterkenny, and Dennis McGee in Gweedore to reinforce their message. I've raised this issue over 50 times on the floor of this House during the term of this current Dáil, and each and every time I and other opposition TDs from the county get the same old rhetoric from yourself and the government. You quote figures, you tell me it's the biggest scheme ever of its kind, you look at me dismissively as if to say, sure, that's sorted, why are you bringing it up here again? But you don't really listen, and you haven't listened as we give voice to the real concerns the families have living with defective blocks. And now you have a chance to do so. Taoiseach, the stark reality is, plain to be seen, the scheme isn't working. It doesn't reflect the science that has emerged, science that was driven by the defective block campaign themselves, not by government departments or the political system. It is failing the families across Donegal whose lives are devastated by defective blocks. The defective blocks crisis will also affect community buildings, public buildings, and everything built in the last 20 years in the county, reflecting a failed self-certification system brought in by governments of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. You have a chance to fix this. My advice to you is that you should take it. Make a scheme that once and for all reflects and works to address the needs of all families in Donegal, and indeed those across the country as it's going to widen out as well. So, Taoiseach, my question to you is, will you once and for all address the failures of the defective block redress scheme and make a scheme that is fit for purpose? Thank you.
I want to thank Deputy Pringle for raising this issue, and I know this has been an extraordinarily tough and difficult, and those words don't fully capture the struggle and the stress that many families living in your own county and some other counties have been dealing with the loss and destruction of their homes due to defective blocks. We have worked very hard on this issue as a government. Minister McConnell has worked very hard on this at the Cabinet table with our colleagues as well, and we have now seen over 1,600 applications. These are real applications from real people. No, please don't roll your eyes to heaven. And they've been received to the previous scheme, and now we've received an additional 350, in fact over 350 applications to the enhanced scheme up to the end of February of this year, Ceann Comhairle. So this is a lot of people. This is 1,950 applications. The 2022 Act, which we passed, underpins the new enhanced grant scheme, and it has designated the counties of Clare, Donegal, Limerick and Mayo as being within the enhanced scheme. The final regulations were put in place as a result of a very extended and extensive amount of consultation with key stakeholders, particularly the local authorities and the homeowner action groups as well. The Minister for Housing did receive government approval last month for the designation of Sligo County Council under the scheme, and will now arrange for the moving of a motion for a resolution in East House of the Oireachtas, and then bring a second memo to government seeking to give effect to that as well. And the Housing Agency is currently working through the process with 3 additional local authorities in Carlow, Wexford and Fingal County Council as well. Today the Cabinet did agree to try and resolve various issues highlighted by affected homeowners looking to avail of SEAI support, and the Minister Ryan will announce the details of that in due course as well, but he's worked hard on that as well. We have obviously set up also under Minister O'Brien an implementation steering group for the Enhanced Defective Concrete Blocks Grant Scheme, and this has officials from the relevant councils, from the Department, from the Housing Agency and the Homeowners Liaison Officer as well. The group has met several times over the last number of months, and it's charged with keeping the regulations and the guidelines and the operation of them under review, and we'll continue to do so. We'll continue to engage, we'll continue to listen. But homes are now being remediated. Homes have been remediated, and this scheme, it is a large scheme, is making a real and positive impact. I think even in the actions we took today at Cabinet, we are showing an ongoing willingness to listen and to try and respond as best we can. But the scheme is open, applications are coming in, and I really do hope at last this will make a real and meaningful difference to many families.
Pringle?
Taoiseach, there's no doubt the scheme is open, and there's been 1,500 applications, like you say. There's thousands upon thousands upon thousands of houses that have to be redressed. It's a scheme that's going to last 25, 30 years at the rate that you're going at the minute on it. And it's a scheme that doesn't meet the needs of very, very many people. There are people in their 50s and early 60s who are looking at having bills of 50, 60, 70, 80,000 euro just to redress their houses. And this is a 100% scheme that your government lauded as being a 100% scheme. People are going to be paying 50, 60, 70, 80,000 euro to get into a 100% redress scheme. This doesn't make sense, and it doesn't suit families. Those people can't go to the bank to remortgage because banks won't give them anything. A lot of them are pensioners. They can't go on. They can't will the scheme on so that they could do it in that way as well. Even these are things that you could be doing and be making changes. Indeed, the mortgageability, houses won't be mortgageable afterwards. The redress here, the redress schemes have been trying, or the campaign groups have been trying to get you to address this. There was a meeting in the department that was postponed about 4 times. I don't think it has met since January. So that's wrong. And that scheme is not meeting the needs of the people that need it. And it will be here for many, many years to come at the rate you're going now.
Taoiseach.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy Pringle. I've just actually seen that I gave you figures to the end of February, but actually to the end of April, we've now 1,644 applications to the previous scheme and 436 to the enhanced scheme, just for the record, because it is important to give you the most up-to-date figures. Today we took I know you know it's a serious issue, and I'm trying to respond with the seriousness that the issue actually deserves, if that's okay. So today the government actually took another decision that will benefit householders in your constituency to the tune of tens of thousands of euro. These are substantive decisions that we're taking, because when we're in government we don't just point out the problems, we also have to work to come up with the solutions. And today we've taken another decision, and I hope that shows to people in your constituency, and I believe it will, and to people in other counties affected too, that the government is listening, and to issues that arise as the scheme progresses we're trying to respond, and today is one very practical example of that. And we will continue to listen, and we will continue to try and respond as best we can. But this scheme, people are applying for it today, homes are being remediated, the implementation group is in place, and I would like to see that engagement that you mentioned that hasn't taken place take place, and I'll certainly follow up with the Department of Housing in relation to that.
Taoiseach, that concludes Leaders' questions. We'll move to the order of business. In accordance with Standing Order 35, a call on the Government Chief Whip, Hildegard Naughton, to move that the arrangements for the week's business be agreed to.
I move.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Deputy Park McLaughlin.
Taoiseach, at the Business Committee, when the schedule was presented, there was serious concerns across the opposition in relation to the time allocated to the Planning and Development Bill. Now, as you know, there's massive a number of amendments, including from your own minister. This is a very, very important bill, and I would urge you not to bring in a guillotine at midnight on Wednesday, to let this run its course over the next number of weeks, to give the necessary time for this bill There are serious repercussions. It's one of the largest bills in the history of the state. Huge need to listen, to engage and to make changes where necessary. So I'm asking for no guillotine on Wednesday on that issue.
And Taoiseach, I'd like to support that call. I don't believe the planning bill should be guillotined tomorrow night. It is a really important bill. We've seen huge concerns about it. We're seeing over 800 amendments down at report stage. There's one amendment in particular that the Minister has put down based on a Labour amendment that we had put down at committee stage, and that will require quite a deal of debate. That's an amendment to criminalise abuse of the planning process. And we're seeing this amendment for the first time at report stage from the Minister. So the Minister has extensive amendments put down at report stage, and it's really not appropriate, we believe, that it will be rushed through and indeed guillotined at midnight tomorrow night.
Shortall.
Thanks. I strongly support that call that there be no guillotine on this massive bill. But Taoiseach, I want to go back to the issue raised earlier in relation to carers. And in reply to Deputy Cairns, you quoted a lot of figures, but you made no reference to the level of need. Now, here's some more figures. 72% of family carers get no respite at all. 72%. Only 1 in 4 family carers get the carers allowance. 50% of family carers have to pay privately for therapies. They've no choice but to do that, and the other 50% go on long waiting lists. So I'm asking you, Taoiseach, will you make time available this week for us to have a debate on how the enormous needs of carers can be met within a reasonable timescale?
Paul Murphy.
Thanks, yes. I want to call for there to be no guillotine on the planning and development bill. It's obviously extremely important in terms of how our planning process will work in the years ahead. Weeks and weeks and weeks of committee debates have gone on, but now that is all going to be condensed into 8 hours or so with a guillotine at report stage. So clearly we need to give this bill as long as it needs for debate.
Deputy Matthew McGrath.
I want to oppose this. I did at Business Committee last Thursday week, and this is a massive piece of legislation and has massive ramifications from all angles. And to think that there was months spent at committee, hours and hours of debate, and so many amendments now being condensed into, and many amendments from the Minister being condensed in such a short debate, and it's crazy to think that we could guillotine such a mammoth piece of legislation that's been in gestation for a couple of years, and indeed that's now before us and needs ample time and discussion. And 8 hours and a guillotine is just outrageous, and we need more time, and that can't happen.
Deputy Pringle.
I go and support the calls for the more time to be given for the planning bill, because it's vitally important for legislation of such importance right across the country. To be guillotined like this is wrong.
Thank you. No one else? Taoiseach, please.
People at home who think this has been in any way rushed, I mean, this had 120 hours at committee, 120 hours at committee. It also went through pre-legislative scrutiny. When Minister Burke was the Minister for Planning, there was many meetings held with various stakeholders. Well, actually, at some point, we need to actually get on and pass a law that is going to reform our planning laws. In here, only a couple of weeks ago, you were all shouting at me about the importance of the Housing Commission, which talked about the need to overhaul our planning system. This place needs to actually do its job, pass the law. There is a housing emergency, there's a housing crisis. Roll up the sleeves, get the job done. We're doing 4.5 hours today. We're doing 8 hours tomorrow. People need homes. We need our planning system reformed. This government's going to actually make progress on housing, while some of you are trying to obstruct that progress.
All right. Are the proposed...
In relation to carers, I'm happy for that to be discussed at the Business Committee. There's no time this week for the reasons we've just outlined, Deputy. We can raise it at the Business Committee. I have no difficulty to it being held. I think there's a purpose. I'm not sure I'm on the Business Committee or the Taoiseach, but you can raise it at the Business Committee.
Are the proposed arrangements for the week's business agreed to? The Chocolate Tar Haven and Harshkin British Tar. In a Gaina Neil, Stolen Gullig Kesh Richard, Votal. Now, she turn votal she not ta, shaska shot, Neil Dahada hooked, near Stain Anya, so go known a shot in a sucrahe. The week's business is agreed. We move to questions on promised legislation. Clear the House, please. Questions on promised legislation. Deputy Mary Lou McDonald, please.
Ceann Comhairle Taoiseach, I understand that the RSA wrote to you last March asking for increased funding and detailing a number of projects that have been stalled due to a shortfall. That has been reported in the media. It seems the authority also informed you that government would have to plug the gap or allow them to increase the cost of the NCT by 10%. Taoiseach, the burden of delivering the funding shouldn't be placed on the backs of motorists who have already seen hikes in fuel costs and insurance premiums. The funding being requested is vital to combat the rise of road fatalities and serious collisions and to continue the delivery of very important education programmes. So I'm asking you, Taoiseach, asking the government to step up on this. You can't expect motorists to foot the bill. Can I ask you to outline your plan to ensure that the Road Safety Authority is funded properly?
So not to be pedantic, but they wouldn't have written to me last March because I wasn't Taoiseach then. But I'll certainly follow up in relation to any correspondence they may have sent to my predecessor. I have met the Road Safety Authority on 2 occasions since becoming Taoiseach. We have authorised them using €3 million more of their reserves for those very important education and awareness campaigns that you rightly talk about. We've also allocated €30 million in additional funding for local authorities to improve road maintenance, because you're also right, that's a factor in relation to collisions. I have chaired a ministerial committee on road safety personally in the last couple of weeks, and I intend to bring a memo to Cabinet on road safety measures before the summer recess.
Issue I've raised previously with you, and I know you spoke about it earlier, and that is the ongoing failure by government to provide adequate accommodation for those who've come here seeking refuge and are in the international protection system. And I do agree with you, it is inhumane and it is unsustainable to have people camping on streets or in public parks, but it's a failure of government that has caused this and the lack of any alternative options for people. And, you know, it's simply not an appropriate response to just keep fencing off areas of the canal in this city, public parks, public spaces. We've got a group of men now who are forced to sleep in tents on Wilton Terrace at Leeson Street Bridge. I've been told by our great volunteers who are working to support the men that they have now been ordered to move on today by the Gardaí, and yet they have nowhere to go. That's not appropriate, and it's not a humane and it's not a sustainable policy on the accommodation of those who come here seeking asylum. So my direct question is, what is your longer term or even your medium and short term plan to provide decent, sustainable accommodation for those who've come here seeking refuge?
No, it's a fair and important question, and my medium term or even quicker than medium term plan is to secure state-owned lands that can provide safe shelter and access to sanitation. I'll personally chair a multi-agency meeting on this issue of migration shelter this evening, I believe. I do have a view, though, in relation to the tents. That I think you and I share the view. I mean, none of us want to see that happen from a humanitarian point of view. I also don't want to see it happen from the city's point of view either. I am pleased that we have, through our actions, managed to see about 690 additional people provided with shelter who were in tents. And I do believe people were being moved on to alternative accommodation this afternoon. But I'm happy to update you after my meeting this evening.
Cairns. Oh, sorry, Deputy Shortall.
At the outset, I'd just like to welcome a group of women in the gallery from the Inner City Organisations Network, and I'm raising an issue which would be of relevance to them and many, many other people. I gave you notice of this, Taoiseach, earlier on, and that is the fact that a charity called GP Care for All, which was established by Dr. Austin O'Carroll, is in real difficulty now because of changes that were made to the taxation of GP income. And I really am asking you, Taoiseach, to give your urgent attention to this matter. A wonderful GP service has been provided in Summerhill Primary Care Centre since 2016. Really, really important service. And a similar one is about to be opened in Finglas West, where there is currently no GP at all. Now, what I want to bring to your attention is that further to tax changes that were made last January, the business model for this kind of charitable GP service is rendered now non-viable. And what's needed very urgently is that the transitional arrangements which previously existed should be reinstated in respect of charities like this. GP charities until such time as the relevant legislation can be amended. But I'm really appealing to you very strongly, Taoiseach. We cannot afford to lose that vital service in Summerhill, and we desperately need the promised new service in Finglas.
Thank you for contacting my office in relation to this. I'll personally undertake to speak today to the relevant ministers, and I'm happy to come back to you, Deputy.
Thank you very much.
Corla. Last week, the UN Secretary General called for a ban on fossil fuel advertising, similar to the ban on tobacco advertising. Antonio Guterres asked every country in the world to bring in this ban. He called the fossil fuel companies the godfathers of climate chaos, who rake in record profits while the most vulnerable are being left stranded. Taoiseach, the fossil fuel companies are destroying our climate just like the tobacco companies destroyed people's health. We have, in People Before Profit, already introduced a bill to do just that, to ban fossil fuel advertising last March. So the legislation has already been drafted. It could be supported by the government tomorrow. He said, it's we, the peoples, versus the polluters and the profiteers, and it's time for leaders to decide whose side they're on. So Taoiseach, which side are you on? We have a ban on tobacco advertising. Will you heed the call of the UN Secretary General and ban fossil fuel advertising?
Thanks, Deputy Murphy. We're clearly on the side of saving the planet. We're clearly on the side of reducing our emissions by 51% by 2030. We have a very ambitious climate action plan in relation to that and a lot of work to do. We do need to urgently move away from fossil fuels to renewable and sustainable energies. And I'll ask the Minister for the Environment to share a view in relation to the UN Secretary General's comments.
Thank you, Taoiseach, it's just in relation to the debate we had earlier about carers and carers allowance and how carers need to be treated better. We have a situation where somebody who's applying for carers allowance cannot work more than 18 hours a week. We have people who are participating in schemes where they have to work 19 and a half hours. For instance, the Rural Social Scheme, which is a social activation scheme, not a job activation scheme. And I think it's important that we allow people to work that 1.5 extra hour and still qualify for the carers allowance, because it is important, in view of all that has been said, that we make sure that caring is available in the home, and that those who are caring also have some sort of an outlet where they can go and do work locally for their own feeling of fulfilment within their community. And I think it's important that maybe in the context of the next budget that we would actually look at changing the hours from 18 to 19 and a half hours to meet that. Thank you.
Thanks to Deputy Canny. We'll certainly give that consideration, and I note the motion that you brought forward to this House recently around a range of issues to do with carers, and Minister Humphreys would have indicated at that time her intention to look at a number of these issues, plus the means testing issue, in advance of the budget. So we'll factor that into our budget considerations and engage with you before that.
Dublin with the canals and the tents and everything else, but the people of Ireland and the people of Tipperary were welcoming and are very welcome to the Ukrainian refugees. But now the situation with they being moved out of places like Red Cabin and indeed Borrisokane, which was a model for everyone to look at, indeed Dundrum House Hotel now, and indeed what happened in Rosscray and Clonmel and the Haber roadside, ongoing activity there today, and Cairns Hotel. There's no real cohesive plan and no proper engagement with communities. None. I'm grappling myself to deal with the engagement section of the department, and they're totally understaffed, under-resourced, and there's no proper cohesion or proper engagement. These were models. Borrisokane was a model, and so was Red Cabin and nursing home going to be used now to change of use for something else. And people feel betrayed. Dundrum House Hotel had 250, there's now 52 going out and 52 iPass people coming in. It's causing confusion and consternation. And there needs to be a cohesive plan and proper engagement and timely engagement, and not cloak and dagger. So it's a very, very serious and concerning situation.
I heard the serious concerns of the people of Cairns recently when I was in Tipperary, and indeed I've received some correspondence from them, which I will come back to them on after I've engaged with the Minister. But I do take it that Cairns, and I'm just referencing that one because it's the one I know, have been very welcoming and very helpful in responding to the humanitarian crisis.
Taoiseach, I'm asking that you make every effort to ensure that staff at the National Advocacy Service are awarded their paid claims as recommended by the Labour Court last January, where they recommended that management in the National Advocacy Services would make a case to the Department for the funding required to provide their pay increases. Yet 5 months later, no progress. And staff have no option but to strike because there has been no increase in staff salaries and cost of living payments since 2010, 14 years ago. And Taoiseach, that strike is scheduled to take place tomorrow. Now, staff at this service provide assistance to people with disabilities all over the country to interact and interface with the various state agencies. And if they strike tomorrow, all those who rely on their services will be cut adrift. Finally, if a government department-funded agency is refusing to implement Labour Court recommendations, how can we expect other employers to honour Labour Court rulings, Taoiseach?
I thank Deputy Harkin for raising this important matter. I'm advised by Minister Humphreys that the Minister understands that the National Advocacy Service submitted a business case to the Citizens Information Board in relation to pay grades and other conditions on the 10th of May, last on foot of that Labour Court recommendation. My understanding is that as part of these considerations, the Citizens Information Board held a meeting with the Advocacy Service along with Kevin Duffy, former chairman of the Labour Court, on the 30th of May. This discussed a path forward to resolve the issues. I believe that CIB wrote to the National Advocacy Service in the last week to follow up, and there have been ongoing discussions involving all parties. I'd encourage all parties to engage fully and positively in the process, and therefore I would hope that while there is a process ongoing, that industrial action should not proceed.
Taoiseach, I want to raise the important issue of the primary care centre for Drimna, which has been repeatedly delayed. There's been huge development in Drimna, development of housing, which is very welcome, but it's massively increasing the population and massively increasing the pressure on the limited spaces that are there. Currently, we have senior citizens travelling to Naas, from Drimna to Naas for ophthalmology services. There is a site that's earmarked for the development of a Drimna primary care centre, but the development just seems to be moving at an absolute snail's pace. So I would ask the government to get onto the HSE and try and push this along. But I think also what is absolutely essential is, so far there's been absolutely zero engagement or liaison with the community in Drimna about what facilities are needed, what would be available, how this can be shaped to actually meet the needs of a growing community in Drimna. So.
Thanks, Concordia. Thanks to Deputy Costello for raising the issue of the need for a primary care centre for Drimna. I will follow up with the HSE directly. As you say, a site was identified, and I'll seek an update for you in relation to timelines and also that piece around engagement in terms of the facilities and services that are needed.
Taoiseach, you will remember the closure of the Accident and Emergency Unit in Roscommon Hospital in 2011, and in its place we were promised a rapid response vehicle with an advanced paramedic on it 24/7, not least for the reason that the distance people in Roscommon would be to their nearest A&E, and that has been in place now for the last 13 years. In recent months it has been quietly removed, and it is now not the case that we have an advanced paramedic on the response vehicle on a 24/7 basis. I've been raising this in recent months with the National Ambulance Service to no avail. They've gone as far as to tell me that, frankly, a paramedic is the same as an advanced paramedic, which it is not. I want to ask you, Taoiseach, to keep your commitment to the people of Roscommon. We need an advanced paramedic on the rapid response vehicle on a 24/7 basis, and I want to ask you to keep your commitment in relation to that. It is really important.
Well, thanks to Deputy Curran for raising that issue in relation to the importance of the advanced paramedic and the rapid response vehicle, and I'll follow up directly with the Minister for Health and ask him to revert you.
Thank you, Taoiseach. I
Previously, the urgent need to have the in-person day services restored at the Irish Wheelchairs Association Centre in Cavan Town. I appreciate the work to date of Minister Rabbitte on this important issue. The cessation of services occurred because of staffing shortages. I know from speaking to service users, their families and staff in the IWA that the lack of in-person services is a very serious loss to those people who depend on such vital support week in, week out. To the credit of the local IWA staff, they have put in place outreach and online services pending a return to in-centre services. I wish to appeal again, Taoiseach, as strongly as I can, on behalf of service users and their families, that the HSE should respond positively to the business case put to them by the IWA for some additional resources, small-scale resources, which is critical to facilitate a return to the level of services that is needed in the Cavan Centre, and have the centre reopen at full capacity to meet service users.
Thank you, Deputy Smith, for raising that question. It's not the first time that you have raised it. And what I have done is I have spoken with Edel Quinn, who is organising a meeting in person so as that we can actually work with the IWA, the business case, and actually the HSE to have an immediate resolution to the issue you have raised, to return in-person service in the day centre.
Continued use of the parental alienation clause in family law, which is causing continued and ever-increasing hardship to mothers and some fathers, and particularly to children who are the victims in this entire matter, which the Minister has promised to deal with and has done a lot of work on, and has had a number of ministers on this side of the House. And I would ask that urgent action be taken to bring this to a head.
Thank you, and thank you to the Deputy for continuously raising this issue. The only way and the most important way in which the welfare of a child can be heard in family proceedings is through the various different welfare reports and the Voice of the Child reports. What I've undertaken is a review of those reports, and I'm really pleased to say that that review has come to Cabinet. There are 20 recommendations separated between welfare reports but also Voice of Child reports, and what this recommendations will ensure is that we have a panel of assessors looking at when a report is commissioned, the reason for the report, in particular that there are correct qualifications for those who are carrying out these reports. There will also be guidelines set in place as to where and when and how they are used. When specifically looking at the Voice of the Child, there will be a children's course essentially function put in place to make sure that children's voices are taken into consideration, but also that they're spoken to, engage with, and that they understand what's happening, so that at every stage the welfare of the child is put at the very centre, so that issues like parental alienation cannot take hold and cannot be part of any decisions that are taken in a private court. Thank you.
Good to hear you. He's up Wallam Kesh Boward, Tauchan Boward, Dudros, Nagelta, Ordulat, Durher Dusanui, Gamach, Tauchan Shin, or Shul, in Lakena, Lish, Tauchan Ochula, Acharnuin, your Hordish Shin, Axanish, Tishavigrog, Main Rachti, Richie, Riv, Brishon Towery, Ach, you know, to Brishon Towery, Chaftanis, Guskippy, so Kaner Vase Natauchan, Kaner Vase, and Rachti, the Dol, Trijan Dol. Hishach, I want to raise with you the issue of the elections to Boward, Dudros, Nagelta. It was initially told that they would be happening on the same day as the local elections. Now we're being told that the legislation will be through before the summer break. So I'm just asking, when will they be? Will the legislation be through the door by that break?
Thanks very much to Deputy Farrell for raising this issue, and I had a brief word with Minister Catherine Martin on this earlier today. My understanding is it still plans to publish that legislation quite shortly. Obviously the timeline for passing it will depend on all of us in this House. We're reviewing alongside that, or in parallel to that, the timeline for those elections, and I'll revert to you shortly on that.
The Department of Education is placing many schools in a very difficult position of having to choose whether to fund caretaking services or secretarial services. I've been contacted by a number of schools in my own constituency, and they have expressed concern and indeed were shocked over the fact that the ancillary services grant wouldn't cover the caretaking costs for this year. Now, the CPSMA have carried out a survey, and that survey clearly showed that at least 7 out of 10 schools ran at a deficit in funding at least one stage during the year. So it clearly shows that schools are being placed in an unfair position, really, trying to choose whether to employ a secretary or a caretaker, but it also shows deep respect for caretakers who do fantastic work in the school community. So I'm asking you if you will intervene immediately to sort out this mess with the ancillary grant. Garb Maggott.
Thanks to Deputy Nolan for raising this issue. Let me agree with you that caretakers and school secretaries are a crucial part of school communities, and we all see that as we travel around the country and in schools in our own community. I'll certainly talk to the Minister for Education about the ancillary services grant and the impact that you believe it's having on schools in your community, and ask her to revert to you.
Last week in Limerick, I attended a sad and tragic funeral of Nicole Morey, one of my constituents, whose family are very well known to me, and who was killed by one of her family dogs on the day after her 23rd birthday. Your colleague the Taoiseach is on record as saying, and I quote, that he's in favour of a blanket ban on all 11 types of dogs on the state's restricted list. Do you agree with the Taoiseach? I hope you do, because some of those breeds have been banned in most European countries, most particularly recently in the UK. Now, I know the Minister Humphreys has set up a committee, etc., set it up, I think, several months ago. I don't know if it's actually sat yet, but I know that she's now instructed the chairman to call a meeting and come up with a recommendation by next autumn. But what I'm asking you, Taoiseach, is would it be possible to inject a bit of energy and a bit of speed into this process, because these incidents are proliferating?
Thanks to Deputy O'D for raising this very important matter, and can I begin by extending my sympathies to the family of Nicole Morey. I think the whole country extends their sympathies to that family and community at this horrific time. Minister Humphreys did update Cabinet on this today, Deputy, and you are correct that it is. She has asked the task force looking at these issues around dogs, dangerous dogs, dog control, to prioritise this issue around the ban on certain breeds. I believe it's due to meet on the 26th of June. And we've asked that it would report on that specific issue as quickly as possible, because we do need to act on this. Deputy Cairns.
Taoiseach, I wouldn't normally bring such a local and specific issue directly to you, but actually you're not the first Taoiseach that I've brought it to, because the situation is going on so long and is so desperate. There's a village in my constituency, Shannon Vale, a gorgeous village next to Clonakilty, and for 2 decades now, in the centre of the village is a green space, which was obviously the heart of the village, where festivals happened, where children played, all of those things, next to a river. And for 2 decades now, it's been kind of fenced off and unusable and dangerous because of overflow from a wastewater treatment plant. It stinks, and this community are just sick and tired of raising this issue constantly. The EPA has said that the leaks are a risk to drinking water in the area. And I've been raising this myself since I was elected, and there's just been no focus on the issue. Shannon Vale really needs to receive a commitment that they'll be included in Uisce Éireann's investment plan for 2025. Otherwise, they'll be waiting at least until 2029 to potentially be included in the next one. So I'm urging you, Taoiseach, to please have a look at this, and please do what you can, because it's gone on for a ridiculously long amount of time. They can't be expected to continue to raise it, and it is having a huge impact on the entire community there that they can't use that green space in the centre of their community.
Thanks to Gordo, thanks to Deputy Cairns for raising this issue for the community of Shannon Vale. And it sounds like a very horrific situation for that community to be going on for so long. I mean, what might be of use for me, if it is of use, I'm happy to ask that maybe Uisce Éireann and others would convene a meeting of the Oireachtas members for the constituency to see if we can make right done it. Well, I'll speak to the Chief Executive of Uisce Éireann and see where the situation's at and come back to you. But I think getting people in a room together, I'm happy to convene that if that's of use to you.